Oh, hey, so I thought that we could all use with a short series of short videos on study hacks based on the top 4 problems that college students face when academically speaking. And in my previous videos and my TikTok, I went over the top 4, which is being lost or forgetting, you can't remember the stuff, you sit down and take a test and your mind goes blank, or falling behind, that's a biggie, or just existential dread, just anxiety and depression. And it's totally normal for you to be experiencing any of these and some. So this video is just going to be about the very first one, getting lost. When you're lost, a lot of times, in my experience, things sound like a foreign language. I was sitting in my very first class of chemistry, and I'm a biochemistry degree person now, so there is hope. But my very first class of chemistry, it sounded like they were talking Greek. I mean, literally, it was like Charlie Brown's school teacher, wah, 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 wah. I could not understand a word they were saying. It's a terrible feeling. I completely understand. It is not a comment on your intelligence. It's not a comment on what you're cut out to do. If you feel like you have a calling to go into whatever degree, but you're in a main class and you don't understand it, that doesn't mean that you should change your major. If it's brand new information, you've never had a class on this before, you're going to be lost. You're not going to understand what they're talking about. Also, the feeling like, oh, everybody else in this class gets it but me. That's a horrible feeling. If you don't understand something, something's confusing to you, at least 4 other people in class are also confused, and they are too scared to speak up as well, and they think that they're the only ones. Also, uh, studying makes you sleepy. This is a big thing. A lot of times, I can figure out as a tutor and a teacher, I can figure out what the obstacle is with the student by their actual physiological reactions. And if studying makes you sleepy, that is a very important clue. So, to troubleshoot being a student, when you're lost and you don't understand the materials, there's a lot of stuff that you can do to get your game back, okay? First, if you go to whatever textbook that your teacher has, and you go to the syllabus and you find out for the upcoming lecture what chapter or what unit, or what pages or whatever they're going to be lecturing over. You go to that chapter and you can flip to the beginning of the chapter or the end of the chapter. It depends on the textbook. Sometimes it's the beginning, sometimes it's the end of the chapter, but each chapter has an objectives list. That's usually almost always at the beginning of the chapter, but it goes over the major points, that the takeaways that they want you to take away from this chapter. And so that helps you actually know what to focus on when you're reading the chapter, when you're studying, or when you're listening to the lecture. Those are the main points. And so it gives you kind of a roadmap of what you should be focusing on, what's important and what's not. And because we all run into that teacher where we ask, what should we study for the test? And the teacher says everything, which is not helpful because we only have 24 hours in a day. We only have 7 days a week. Sure, if my time was unlimited, I would study everything, but I don't have that time. And I need to know what points you want me to get, as a teacher. I need to know what points this class is trying to get me to take away. So if the teacher's not going to be helpful, check the syllabus. Sometimes it's listed in the syllabus, but regardless, go to the objectives page at the beginning of the chapter, and the textbooks will list the objectives for that chapter. And just go over it and just keep that in the back of your mind when you're studying. Also, you want to go to the back of the chapter. It's usually at the back of the chapter. You want to go in the back of the chapter and they usually have a vocabulary list. And this is the main thing that's probably putting you to sleep when you're studying. Because when you go past a word that you don't understand, or when you go past a vocabulary word and you don't know the exact meaning or the specific technical meaning that the author is talking about, you start reading down the page, you kind of skip it and you start reading down the page, right? Or you're like, oh, well, I'll figure out what that word means in the context of the sentence. You keep reading, you get to the bottom of the page, and you have no idea what you just read, right? Or you can't even get to the bottom of the page because you start yawning and you start nodding off, you get really sleepy. That is because of vocabulary. Well, it could be because you just are not granting yourself enough sleep at night. But besides that, it's the vocabulary is what sets off the sleepiness. Because what's happening in your brain is your brain notices that word that you don't understand what that word means. And even if you keep reading on, your brain is stuck back at that word. So you can read the whole page if you want, but while your eyeballs are going over the words, your brain is going, what was that word? What did that mean? And it won't let it go. And so your brain is not paying attention to anything that came after that word that you don't understand. So it is so much easier to study if first, before you even start studying, go to the end of the chapter and look at that vocabulary list. And if you run into one of those vocabulary words again and you forgot what it meant, now you know where to turn. Just look it up real quick. Just go back to the vocabulary page and just look it up real quick. What are they talking about when they say that? Oh, okay. And then go back and reread that sentence and then just move on. It's going to help so much, and it keeps you from falling asleep while you're trying to study. So another tip is that say you've been in class for a month and all of a sudden, at first you were fine, but then all of a sudden, like it just deviated and you're like, what? And you could not follow what's going on. You're lost. Okay, go back to when you did understand. Reread the very last part of that and then progress from there. And that helps so much. People, I understand all of our time is valuable and don't want to waste their time. But wasting time and investing time are two different things. It's not a waste of time to go back and reread something that you had already studied. It's a good investment of your time. Another thing, you have to repeat studying things. You can't just study something once and then go and take tests on it. Studying is like watching a good movie. The first time you go in to watch a movie, you don't know what's going to happen. So you're focusing on the basic plot points and the main characters and, oh, what's going to happen? How's it going to turn out? But if you go back and see that movie again, like a couple days later, you're going to notice a whole bunch of details that was part of that movie that you didn't notice the first time you watched it. Why didn't you notice it the first time you watched it? Because it was new information. So you were focusing on the most important points. But now that you've got the most important points down, when you're going back to seeing it for a second time, now you're picking up the details. You're getting some juicy stuff that you didn't even know was there at first. It's the same thing with studying. The next time you study, go over that same material again. And I guarantee you're going to pick up more details that you didn't notice were there the first time around. And this is actually a big thing. If you think that you're good when you're studying, but then you go in and take the tests and the test questions seem way harder than what it was that you were studying, it's because you didn't repeat studying the same materials. You didn't pick up enough detail. You didn't go into enough depth on it. And the way to go into depth and understand the material is to go over it again and again. Also, you always want to stay ahead of the lecture. So stay ahead of your next class. You want to study the upcoming material before that class's lecture, not after. You don't wait to go to class and hear what the teacher has to say and then go study it, because you're not going to understand a word that is coming out of that teacher's mouth, because they're talking up here at college level. And if you've never had this course before, if this is new information, you're not going to understand that. You study the material before. You don't have to thoroughly read the book. I know we all have other things to do in our lives, but you do have to dedicate yourself to sitting down and going over the material so you have at least some understanding of what's going on and the flow and what they're talking about and what you need to know about this chapter. Also, if you go over the material before you come to class, then when you're going over the material, jot down the questions, jot down the stuff that doesn't make sense to you. You don't have to study to the point where it makes sense to you. You only have to study to the point where you can just write down some questions about the stuff that doesn't make sense to you. Just identify what doesn't make sense and write it down. Then you come to class, and when the teacher's lecturing, you've got some really good questions to ask. Which brings me to my next point. And this is sort of counterintuitive from, the normal idea of what it means to go to class in college. Don't take notes during your lecture in class. I mean, record them. Record them on your phone. Record the lecture, on your phone. Don't post it to YouTube or anything that's going to embarrass the teacher or anything that you have not asked the teacher's permission to do. Okay, if you record something, it's just between you and your phone. Don't post it, because that's way bad etiquette, and it's probably illegal in several states. And you might get kicked out of school because the schools have policies on that too. But record the lecture on your phone. Don't take notes, because what happens is you will be in class and the teacher says something, and so you're like, oh, I need to take that down as a note. So you start writing it down as a note, and what happens? While you're writing that down as a note, you miss the next thing that they're saying. Now you're lost. Now you're lost in lecture because you missed the next thing that they said because you were busy writing down the previous thing that they said. So don't take notes during lecture. Just record it. You can go home later. You can listen to it and take notes then. But you may not even need to take notes then from the lecture, because if you're following my steps here, you have already taken notes because you have already studied the material before that day. You studied the material before the lecture day. You've already gotten your notes written, don't you? So you don't need to take notes during the lecture. You just need to sit back and make sure you understand what the teacher is telling you, that you're following. And you can ask questions at that point because you've already gotten some background from studying before the class. You go in, the teacher's talking. If you have a question, now you don't have to feel embarrassed about asking a question. You have a well-educated question. You're like, well, what does that mean? Like, I didn't get what that meant. I was reading the chapter and you're saying that too, and I don't understand what that meant. Can you go into that, please? Because you're paying the teacher to educate you. So it is your right to ask questions, and do not ever feel embarrassed about it. And as I said before, if you have that question, chances are 3, 4, 5 other people at least have that exact same question that you do, and they're just too embarrassed to speak up. And a good way to do this is when you study with a red pen. Study with a red pen, because it's you when you're studying, every time you run into something that you don't understand, and when you look it up you still don't understand it. I mean, try to look it up on your own first. Your teacher's not your own personal Google, but if you still don't understand it, you take that red pen and you put a big old red question mark in the margin by the paragraph that you're having a problem processing, that you're having a problem understanding. And if you know what specific thing is confusing you, you can even make a note in the margin on that question. What is a red pen? Or anything that you don't understand what it is, or you don't understand the logic behind it. Like, you're like, whoa, 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 how did you get that from that? just anything that's confusing you that you have a question about while you're studying before you go into the lecture for that lecture for the class. And when the teacher gets to that point, lecturing about that material, that specific topic, that's when you ask your question. You're like, okay, yeah, and I was reading this in the chapter last night or whatever, and I didn't understand that. And you're mentioning it now. I don't. Can you go into that more because that's confusing. I don't understand. And it's an educated question. It's an intelligent question to ask, which goes into my next point. And this is especially about if you're in a math class. Which, by the way, if you're watching this because you're having problems in your math class, I have a video called "How to Take Notes in Math Class" because nobody knows how to take notes in math class. It's not hard. It's just that nobody teaches you how to take notes in math class, and it's kind of a whole different ballgame. You don't want to just write down the numbers, but I'll leave you to go watch that video on your own. But what I will say, and this is for everything, not just math, especially math, but not just math, do not use pencils. Because the reason why students usually want to use pencils is so they can erase their mistakes. Do not ever erase your mistakes. Never. Those mistakes are going to be your biggest teacher in the entire class. It's not going to be your professor, it's going to be your mistakes, is what's going to teach you. And so you don't want to erase those. You want to keep those down on your papers, on your notes. And all you do is you can just draw like a little thin X through them, or just draw just a line through it so you can still read behind that line. You can still read what your mistake was. Also, it helps you if you go into like a tutor or you go in to see your teacher because you need help with something and you're like, I need help with blah, blah, blah. I was doing this problem. I couldn't get this problem right. The first thing they're going to do is ask to see your work that you were doing trying to get the problem done. And what are you going to say? Oh, I erased it. I erased all my work. That doesn't help because then the teacher or the tutor does not know where you're not understanding things. And you're not going to know where you're not understanding things. And especially when you go back to study for the test, the exam, you can go back and look at those mistakes and go, oh, I got to make sure that I don't do that. That's what tripped me up the first time. Okay, I got to keep that in mind not to get tripped up by that this time. Don't erase your mistakes. Your mistakes are even more valuable than your correct answers. Also, if you're not understanding something, a lot of times it's because a textbook and a lecture just doesn't cut it for your brain to be able to process the information. There's nothing wrong with you. It's just a normal human thing that you need more than a textbook and a lecture in order to understand something. So sometimes you need to get hands-on. You need to go try it out and actually practice something. You need to go to the library and see models. You need to go to the labs and you need to see how it's actually in real life in front of you. If that's not available, you draw out diagrams or use drawings or map things out or just map out the flow of if you're studying like a process, map it out like this happens and then this happens and then this happens and then this happens, with arrows so you can actually see the whole chronological order of things. And of course, you want to watch tutorial videos because they give you great examples. And it's always good to get more than one person to explain to you about something or how to do something. Because your teacher is explaining to you how to do something, but your teacher can only communicate how they communicate. So if you watch more than one person explaining this thing to you, they're going to explain it different ways. And one way might really click with you better than the other ways. The sum total of everybody explaining things to you differently, you can piece that together and finally get an understanding of what's going on. And finally, look, if you're lost in class, go see a tutor. Almost every single college in the United States has tutoring centers. Sometimes it's other students who've already taken that class and they got an A in it and they understand what's going on. So it's like a peer tutor situation. Sometimes it's like a doctoral candidate or a master's degree student, or a higher level bachelor's degree student who's doing this for a work study program or something. But either way, it doesn't matter. Sometimes it's just professional tutors, but you are paying this tuition and tutoring comes included in that tuition you're paying. So get your money's worth. So in summary, if you're lost or don't understand the materials, it's not your fault. You're not doing anything wrong. You're not bad at that. You're not bad at math. You're not bad at science. You're not bad at that subject. It's just you're processing new information, and you need to recognize that and do what needs to be done in order for you to absorb all the information you need to do so you can pass that test. So go over the objectives and the vocabulary first in the textbook before you start studying anything else. Go back over previous material and start from where you were not confused. Start from where you actually knew what you're talking about, and then come forward with it. Study the material before the lecture. So you go in already knowing what the teacher's going to talk about. The teacher will make so much more sense to you if you do that, I promise. Study with a red pen and write down the questions that you have. Any questions that you have, keep that red pen available and write it down in the red pen. I say red pen because you can find it really quickly, leafing through. Use models, draw diagrams, maps, tables, something that is going to help your brain organize that information. Watch tutorial videos and have different people explain the same thing to you, because one person might explain it in a way you don't understand, another person might explain it in a way that totally clicks with you and you're like, oh, of course I got it now. And definitely get your money's worth out of that college tuition and go see the tutor.